I can tell you one thing. Technology is the single most important aspect of every business that has successfully scaled.
It's time for that Real Estate Tech Guy. It's your weekly chance to explore how technology can help your real estate business explode. Each week, you'll hear from real estate investors who have been there and done that and find out their favorite technology tips. Listen in as Jordan speaks with tech companies and learns about new technologies and new ideas that will help you scale your business. And now, join your host, Jordan Samuel Fleming, CEO of Smartphone, for this week's episode.
Hey everybody, it's Jordan Samuel Fleming here with another episode of That Real Estate Tech Guy, and I am absolutely delighted that my co-pilot for today's episode is a phenomenal investor and educator, Eric Brewer. Eric, welcome to the podcast. Give us a little introduction to yourself and the different things you do in real estate investing.
Yeah, Jordan, thanks for having me this morning. I started in real estate in 2006 after about an 8-year career in the car business. And just before the car business, out of high school, I spent and did my time in the U.S. Army. When I got started in real estate, I was predominantly a fix and flip guy. I was buying stuff off the MLS, doing retail renovations, taking them to the MLS and selling them. 2008, obviously the financial crisis happened. It got really hard for me to sell my inventory, but it got really easy to buy bank-owned properties, HUD properties, short sales, and that was really, I think, where I sort of cut my teeth in real estate because, you know, when you start in 2006, 2008 came like this. I was just finally maybe starting to figure stuff out, and then someone pulled the chair out from under me. So now, today, flash forward to today, we have a business that does, I think last year we ended at 397 closed deals, and we do a mix of wholesale, novation, turnkey, and fix and flip. And I keep about maybe 10 or 15 rentals a year. So that's the real estate investing side of our business. Over the course of my real estate career, I've implemented EOS into my business about 6 years ago. Recently have gone through scaling up certification with Vern Harnish and the Rockefeller Habits in an effort to really just empower myself to do a better job of leading my business and growing as an owner. But I also went through the process of getting certified. So I do some coaching and some consulting, have about a dozen or so folks that I do one-on-one coaching with. And then I also discovered novations back in 2008, 9, and 10. For me, it started as an effort to circumvent FHA seasoning requirements. And the seasoning requirements for FHA start when you record a deed. So I was trying to figure out how I could eliminate the recording of a deed when I took equitable interest or ownership of a property, and slowly but surely found that novations could be applied to wholesale real estate. And last year we did about 160 novations at almost $4 million in profits without doing a single renovation on any of those. So I think that's the big thing a lot of people have a misconception about, is that historically novations were taught as a fix and flip strategy. What I teach is a wholesale style novation transaction on wholesale condition properties, but being sold to retail buyers.
Let me put my, hand up as the technology guy in the room and not the real estate guy in the room. There may be people out there who are relatively new. I'm going to ask the dumb question. Can you explain exactly what novations are? Because I hear the term all the time from people, and I must admit, I'd love an accurate and succinct definition.
Yeah. So I'll explain it the way that I need to hear it at a third grade level, because that's about how I understand things. So if you think about like normal wholesale real estate, it's done. The mechanism that's used is an assignment, right? Like you get a property under contract, you assign your equitable interest to a cash buyer, and then the difference between there is your assignment fee or your profit. So that mechanism works for the standard way of wholesale. A novation, the actual language means replacement or new. So when we novate our agreement rather than assigning it, this now becomes a lendable transaction, meaning we can sell to retail buyers using mortgages like FHA, VA, Fannie Mae. So that's the mechanism, right? That's the technical explanation of a difference. Assignment, your contract is still in play. You're assigning your interest, so there's technically two contracts in play. When you novate, you actually conditionally release your original purchase agreement in exchange for the new third-party retail agreement, which is financeable. So that's what creates the opportunity to take your deals to the open market and sell to a retail buyer at retail prices. So then that changes everything. It changes the way we analyze a deal. It changes the actual deals that go after, because typically wholesale, you go and you look for the most messed up house on the block, right? Because that normally is an indicator of some motivation and the opportunity for a discount. So when you start to do novations, you no longer have to just buy ugly houses.
Yeah, and interesting. And also, a conversation I have all the time with customers and with people on this podcast is all about the buyer sort of the methodology, the lists, the way of finding the best buyers. And and the wholesale structure is so dependent on you being able to know that you've got them in your pocket to be able to find someone who's going to take over the assignment of that contract. Otherwise, all the work you do getting something under contract, who cares if you can't assign it? But this then allows you to find the houses and go to the open market in a way that, but that still doesn't need. I'm guessing then you're still not putting down that cash that you would put down if you were doing a fix and flip, if
Correct.
you were trying to do that.
Or even if you just wholetailed it, right? Like a typical wholesale requires you to go to closing, fund the transaction, close on the transaction, and those are oftentimes very profitable deals. The challenge for that would be like in my market where 75% of buyers are using FHA financing. Even if you were to close on that same deal and try and resell it, you'd have to hold it for at least 91 days before you could even write the contract. And then you have all this risk. Like if you bought something around May of this year and thought that you were going to wholesale it and it went to the market in July, depending on what market you're in, it could have nosedived 15, 20%. So there's, it's got that. That's why I say it's a wholesale style transaction, because the risk is minimal to zero. Doesn't require you, like a lot of investors, we've taught this now to just over 300 investors. For those that are doing wholesale, it's a very easy pivot, right? Because wholesale is really just a marketing and sales business. But to your point, a big part of wholesaling is building that robust buyers list. When you take your property to the open market by way of MLS, you have access to the world's best buyers list. Yeah. So that whole segment of the business is almost non-existent for you, and you can focus all of your energy on locking up contracts on the acquisition side.
And you still have that, as you say, you still got that essentially sales and marketing business model, but without the need for necessary. I mean, I've had Paul from Town Square on the podcast, and I had Eli from Audantic the other day on the podcast, and we spent a lot of time talking about buyers, about the need to find the right buyers and the understanding of what a good buyers list allows you to do when you're looking for properties. Because you've got to sort of match up the properties you're going after to the buyer's appetites, or you're going to be stuck there with a bunch of contracts that mean nothing. The novation side of things allows you to essentially then bypass that concern, knowing you've got a much wider market for a retail sell.
Yeah, like I've spent quite a bit of time with both the folks at Town Square and Eli and Chris over at Audantic. And Audantic specifically, we dove into like the demographics of the buyers, which they track, at a super granular level. And the most active investor buyer is a new investor. They buy more property than any other demographic. So the guy that buys 0 to 2 properties a year, that investor buys more of the inventory than the folks that buy 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 20 plus. They also pay the highest price, right? If you think about when we bought our first investment property, most people paid too much. So in the eyes of a seller who better to get your properties in front of than the newer investor, right? A lot of times they have FOMO, they want to get started, they're eager, and as a result, they'll pay more for a property. So what's the second part of that? The majority of those buyers, when they first start out, are working with a real estate agent. They're shopping the MLS, right? They don't have direct to seller marketing. They're not, on a buyer's list yet. If someone's never bought an investment property, they're not going to be on a buyer's list. So when you are able to take your properties to the open market on the MLS, you're exposing it to the people that buy the most property and pay the most for the property when they buy it, which is a newer investor and a retail buyer.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the conversation I had with Eli on the podcast around some of his products that are available to people to try and determine in your market where that sweet spot is, so that you are, as he said it, better buyers means I can make better offers. I can win. I can win in my market much easier.
Correct.
That's really, thank you for clearing that up. I didn't mean this to be a Novation school, but it's just one of those things that I'm sure a lot of newer people listen to this podcast, and I think that's a really great succinct definition of it. Now, moving on to your real estate, I mean, obviously, right before 2008, I mean, that's a school in itself.
Yeah.
But that also means that you have seen, you're seasoned enough to have seen a lot of changes in a lot of ways, particularly getting to this podcast, the ways in which technology have evolved for the real estate investor sector just massively. I mean, in the last 5 years, it's evolved enormously, let alone further than that. Can you give us a little more kind of sense as to, as you look at particularly the real estate investment arm of your activities, how you have seen technology become maybe either a greater factor or become more integrated into your business as it's grown?
Yeah, I think it's had a massive impact, and for those that have been able to embrace the development of tech, have been able to capture more market share, and those that have resisted it have probably forfeited some opportunities. I mean, when I started in 2006, my marketing budget was predominantly newspaper and billboard, right? So like the way that I would generate leads was a good old fashioned print ad in the newspaper on the side of a billboard. Today, while we still do billboards, we do not do newspaper. I don't even know if the newspaper is still in circulation, but I think social media has become the new newspaper, right? It's where everybody goes to see last night's sports scores, to catch up on their news, or to see, the latest breaking social events. And it's also provided the opportunity, no one was doing nationwide investing, whether it was buying rental properties outside of their market or doing, wholesaling outside of their market. Tech has provided the opportunity for people to comp properties regardless of where they are. Right now, right? You're doing this podcast and you and I are in completely different segments of the world. Yeah. So, when I think from everything from lead generation, if you look at the developments that have taken place with like cold calling and texting, all of the software that allows investors to, 10x their efforts when it comes to that stuff, PPC and Facebook, right? Those marketing methods and all the developments that have come through, like targeted ads on those platforms, QR codes, the use of QR codes that we've used on direct mail. Right, where we would send direct mail and we had a phone number. Every once in a while, we'll throw a QR code in there and we'll watch our web traffic drastically increase. We'll watch our lead count increase as a result of that direct mail. Different driving for dollars apps, right, where historically that was done at a very manual level. Now you can literally take a picture of the property and the app will send 6 mailers to them, skip trace it for you. And as an investor, particularly newer people getting started, that's a great way to lead gen at a very inexpensive level. Our CRM, we use Salesforce. I've invested well north of 6 figures into my CRM. We have like 12 pieces of automated communication that go out to every single lead instantly when it comes into our system. And it comes from a call tool or it comes from a web form. And then through tech and API connection, it goes directly into Salesforce. It does not require any human interaction. So it happens literally like that. And oftentimes with leads, he who's first wins, right? You can be the best guy, and if you're 30 minutes late because you're relying on a voicemail or you're relying on a Google number, right, that pushes leads to you and you call them 3 or 4 times a day, you're done. So literally, I mean, I look around our business and, everything that we do that provides an advantage to us, right? Like dashboards. We have dashboards and televisions all throughout our offices that display our KPIs and how we're tracking and where we might need to refocus energy. And, there's one in our lobby that shows every single day when I walk in where we are in regards to our monthly revenue targets. It shows the percentage that we're at in real time. Every time someone buys or sells a house, it updates that. So everybody knows every hour that they're in this office whether we're losing or winning. So, yeah, I mean, tech is literally, there's still that human interaction of this business. I think it's the one thing that a lot of iBuyers have tried to figure out, right, to where they go 100% tech. And there still apparently needs to be that human interaction. But when you find the right blend of those two, you're going to have a significant advantage.
Well, and to me, technology has never been about replacing people. It is about activating the best potential, and creating and all that and creating the structures to allow scale to happen. Because scale's where everything falls down. I mean, I've got 40 some odd employees. And trying to run a business with 40 employees, if you don't have structure and technology working well, yeah, you've got 40 people. There's the human element. But how are you making sure everybody is pulling in the right way, in the right, focusing on the right things, that the things are getting done in the right way, and are you freeing their potential as humans to do the best things? And
Right.
that's where I always look at technology. I don't see it as a replacement or as, I see it as the method for getting everybody on the absolute optimum path. When, and the difference, if you're doing 300 and some odd closed deals a year, then you're going to have a structure in place, a human, you're going to have enough of a head count that those tools are not just nice to haves, they're critical, like your CRM. So you've invested in Salesforce. You've got Salesforce. That gives you, that will give you then not only of overall visibility, but it'll allow your teams, maybe you've got acquisition specialists working, to really zero in on exactly what they're needing to do. Is that, can you explain the difference between a management view of a technology in that sense and maybe how someone on the acquisitions team may be focused in your office?
Yeah, there's a good friend of mine, Brandon McCurdy, that works with Sharper Business Solutions and does a lot of consulting and
Gary.
stuff with us. Yeah. And he has a quote. I might mess it up, but we'll power through it and get to the end. But he says, with the use of tech and systems and process, in its absence, it requires talent to overcome the lack of that tech or the lack of that process. When we have the right tech and we have the right process, it allows that talent to only operate in their area of talent, right? So like forever and ever and ever, I think most people would agree that salespeople suck at follow-up, right? And we kind of treated them like a puppy and we rubbed their nose in it and said, I'm just going to force you to stare at this until you behave better, right? And it's like, well, why? Because we know follow-up's important. But if you think about tech, 75% of our follow-up is now automated. It happens, right, at an automated level. When there's required human interaction, the acquisitions agent doesn't have to go search for who to call.
Yes.
The CRM says, hey, you talked to Jordan 7 months ago. Here's the notes that he said about when he was selling, why he was selling, why he wasn't selling now, what's important to him. We've predetermined that today's the day that you're supposed to call him and just have some dialogue. So yeah, when you have good systems and processes, again, whether you have 4 employees or 40, those processes will allow those people to do the work that actually counts, not the manual labor or the stuff that we have to do in the absence of tech or the absence of process. Like when we onboard employees these days with tech, like whether we use Asana or Salesforce, their entire 90-day onboarding process is automated in that software and that tech. Where they're completing tasks and knocking out those milestones over their first 30 and 60 and 90 days. And at the conclusion, it's easy for us to see that they've participated in all the training. They've gone through the milestones that they needed to complete in order for them to qualify to go out and, start to buy homes or to start to sell homes, or to transition into, their full-time position. So, processes, it's literally when you see someone that wants to grow or go from business in the absence of tech and the absence of process, when you scale, you'll just be scaling chaos.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned Gary and Shepard. So I was speaking right after Gary at an event
Yeah.
late last year, and I had never met him before, and so I'm backstage listening to his talk on process, and just going, I'm sitting there pumping my arms, going preach, because I was coming on afterwards on a technology point of view, and it was a perfect dovetail. And I also want to pick up one of the things you said there. I think is really important, around the automation of the follow-up, but also the focus of the agents, because I think there's a misunderstanding or a misconception around the follow-up and the automation, in that you are simply taking these things and dumping on the computer. And I think you pointed it out really nicely. It's not that you're removing the agent or you're taking away. You're letting them focus on exactly what they need to focus. And when they need to focus on something like call, Eric, call Jen, call this deal, it can be put in front of them and they can do it, as opposed to, if you've got an agent that's got 150 leads in their bucket, of which maybe they're actively working on. Let's be honest. You're not working on 150 leads. You're
10.
working on 10. Yeah, you're 15 out of stretch. But one of those other 135 may become one I need to work on tomorrow. And that's the point of the technology, the follow-up, and the agent coming together, is not to say one is more important or one isn't important and one can take responsibility away. It's that you're then making sure that your human element, who's going to close those deals and talk to those people and build those relationships, have exactly what they need to focus on at any one given time, right? That's the key.
Correct.
It's a fascinating point, and I think that there's a challenge with the automation. Every CRM that I know of that's built for real estate investors has a follow-up cadence of some sort. They have, whether it's a good one or a bad one, they've got
Yeah.
something. And I think people look at it the wrong way a lot of times. They look at it, either A, they look at it too short. They schedule 5 follow-ups instead of looking at it as a long game of keeping you in the conversation, or they look at it as, well, I don't have to worry about my agent. Like, my agents don't have to do anything on this lead anymore. Well, that's not necessarily true, because every third follow-up, you probably want to give them a bell,
Correct.
because
Yeah.
there's only so much they want to hear text messages.
Yes.
How do you look at, just out of curiosity, with the follow-up structures that you've built in Salesforce, do you ever go through a review process of tweaking those structures and tweaking those
Yeah.
sort of standards? How do you approach that?
So what we did is we went through the last revision we did is we assigned 12 different lead objects, right? So we assigned and said, from a priority perspective, number one, who gets communicated with first at a manual level? And then number two, what's the duration and the frequency that we want to communicate with each person? So we went through 12 different lead objects. Number one was new lead, no contact. We said that when a new lead comes in and we haven't spoken to them, that's the number one priority. So inside of Salesforce, we assign that the top level of priority. Right. So if you have a pipeline of 100 people that you're communicating with and a new lead comes in with no contact, this automatically goes to the top of the list. Number two was an appointment that needs rescheduled. So we thought that, hey, someone that came in said, yeah, I'd like you to come out and make an offer in my house, and then canceled and wanted to reschedule. We feel like they're at least 50% through the sales process. The sooner we can get them back in to the sales process, the better. So we went through every single one of those circumstances, right? Appointment. Maybe we talked to someone. So I think number three was like what we called in the lead object in Salesforce was pre-appointment hot. So it was someone that we talked to, had a meaningful dialogue, sounded like, felt like, looked like a pretty hot lead, but they weren't ready to schedule an appointment, right? So then we went all the way down to post-appointment hot, post-appointment warm, post-appointment nurture. And we assigned right? A priority to that, and then said, okay, so someone that's post-appointment, we went out to the house, we made an offer, we were physically at the house, they said no, and we think that they're 6 months out. We have predetermined sequences that probably last, I think it was like 120 touch points over the course of 24 months for that lead. And 90% of it was automated, but to your point, maybe every third interaction, it would show up in that person's pipeline. Hey, we've texted and called him, emailed him 4 times. You haven't spoken to him in 12 weeks. It's time to give him a call. So that's what we did. So what we found was, like, from the lead management side, if they worked an 8-hour day, they spent maybe 3 hours actually on the phones. The other 5 hours were a blend of screwing off and looking for people to call. Like, who should I be calling? Right. So, and if you think about it, like, they literally either literally or, people would have a stack of leads on their desk, and they would start at the top of the stack and they'd work their way down, and they only get about this far every day. So the warm to cold stuff would just fall further and further and further down, and they would just stack, because most of us in this business, have a pretty robust marketing budget. We're in love with new leads. So we just we fill the top of the stack, but we never pay attention to the middle and the bottom of the stack. And through that automation, we're able to communicate with lukewarm to cold leads consistently. Because if you don't, if you talk to somebody today, you have a good conversation, you don't buy their house, and you don't really communicate with them effectively over the next 6 months, they're going to get another 10 postcards. They're going to see someone else's billboard, someone else's television ad, someone's Facebook ad. They're going to see a bandit sign. To me, follow-up is like installing a set of blinders on your clients, that as they go by a billboard, they go, no, I'm not going to look at that. I'm already dealing with Jordan. Nope, I'm not going to listen to that radio commercial. I'm already talking to Jordan, right? So what you do is you effectively install blinders on people when you do follow-up, that they're just not receptive to other people's advertising. So it's like running defense, right? And if you think about sports analogies, defense wins championships. I see follow-up as defense.
Well, and I always used to describe it to people as, if you think of, you take a feather and you keep blowing it up so that it's at the top of the pile. Because if you're at the top, if you're in their consciousness, at least every time they get a little text message reminder or a little thing, it's not that it's not that they're ready to bite. But you're just pushing that back up to the top of into their consciousness. Yep. So that time where they're like, all right, I got to do this. They're like, I know exactly, they know who they want to talk to, because you've just kept yourself just inside of their radius.
Yes.
And that is such a critical sales tool that people give up on way too quickly.
I'm not sure what I like better, the analogy of the feather at the top of the pile, or you actually yes, I'm not sure. I think honestly, if you put a gun to my head, I would vote for you actually. Like, if you were like a mime and you couldn't talk and you were trying to describe, like, through charades or something, I now would know. If you and I played charades and the card said feather and you did this, I would know. We would absolutely kill it. So
that'll be my new Instagram advertising. It's just me
That's it. That's a great analogy. That should be a GIF. You're a tech guy. Can't you create a GIF that just, when you want someone to do follow-up, it's you with a blowing a feather to the top of the pile?
I'll send it to my marketing team. Eric, listen, it's closing out the podcast. I've got a series of 5 questions that I ask all the investors, same questions. 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers, and then we're going to close out the podcast with you letting people know where they can reach you. So question number 1, what technology product has had the biggest impact on your real estate business?
Salesforce CRM.
Excellent. Question number 2, what's the biggest mistake you've made with technology in your business?
Not embracing it soon enough.
Okay. Question number 3, what is your best advice on how to integrate technology into your business?
Hire someone that knows more than you do.
Question number 4, what is the one thing you wish you'd known when you'd started out in the business about technology?
That I didn't have to do it myself. It kind of goes back to the other question, right? Like, we struggled with Salesforce for 3 years. It's a huge beast. A lot of these CRMs are, and they have massive capacity. They're fully customizable. That's also the downside. It's fully customizable, right? So unless you tell it what to do, it will do nothing. So, I think the for me, it would have been, we now have a full-time Salesforce engineer on staff that when we want to get something done, what used to take me 60 days through, Upwork and all these other consultants and stuff, like we send an email, it gets done literally 2 hours. Things that used to take us 60 days takes 2 hours now. So just making, I think that's to me that full commitment to saying, hey, the quicker I can innovate and move and embrace and take advantage of tech, it's a constant advantage I'm going to have. So I just said, hey, I want to get a full-time person here that always gives me the ability to make things happen at the snap of a finger. That was a big, big win for me.
Fantastic. Final question. If someone was just starting out in real estate investing, what are 3 bits of technology? You don't have to do brand names, just bits of technology that you would recommend they bring on first.
I would say some type of operating system. Like we use, whether it's Monday, Asana, that kind of stuff, right? Like a task management tool. And then, particularly when you're starting out, the biggest thing you need to be able to do is generate leads. Texting, when you're able to do it at a compliant level, is a super inexpensive way to be able to generate leads. And the same goes for cold calling. It has to be done at a compliant. You have to observe like the do not call list. You got to see a lot of people get in trouble probably because they didn't have the right tech, right? Like the texting software that we use, the cold calling software that we use, runs all of our lists through do not call list and known litigation and all that stuff. So we know when we go out and we hammer the throttle on that stuff that we're compliant. And we're able to generate leads for a fraction of what we have to pay through inbound services. So I think if you're just starting out, those 2 things would really give you an advantage.
Fantastic. Well, Eric, first of all, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you. It's the first time we've met. Just to close out this podcast, just let everybody know how they can, the different things you've got and how they can reach you more importantly.
Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram. I'm pretty active on there. I put out a lot of real estate content, teaching people how to get started, how to scale their business. My Instagram is Eric_Brewer_invest. You can learn a lot about novations. I've been teaching novations now for about 2 years. I call it Wholesale 2.0. We used to chase down ugly houses from super distressed sellers that were willing to sell their house at 50 cents on the dollar. What we've done with novations is we're now able to embrace the larger part of the seller population that doesn't have a messed up house, doesn't have a messed up marriage, isn't going to sell it for 50 cents on the dollar, but might sell it for 80 cents on the dollar. Most investors are not able to capitalize and monetize those deals. Novations will allow you to take your deals and sell them on the open market to a retail buyer at retail prices without ever paying for the property, taking deed, or renovating it. I've now taught that to over 330 people across the U.S. So I teach an entire course and have a coaching program that teaches people either how to start in real estate and use novations to accelerate the learning curve or plug it into their existing business and in some cases double their revenue.
And how can they reach that innovation course? Same Instagram?
brewermethod.com.
brewermethod.com. Fantastic. I'll make sure those links are all in the podcast webpage so everybody can have access to it. I do recommend you hit them up. And Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks for listening to another amazing episode of That Real Estate Tech Guy. Head over to thatrealeestatetechguy.com to check out all episodes and get special discounts on tons of awesome real estate technology platforms.